What's that? Where have I been for a few months? Why was some of the content that I did upload kind of feel like filler? 2020 was kind of an abysmal year, and trying to not die from an unnamed sickness and dealing with multiple stressful events back to back tends to distract you from making videos. I went a little bit more in depth in this video, so feel free to watch it. But hey, we're in the magical year of 2021, and things are still horrible. But I wasn't all that optimistic, so at least things aren't as painful. Anyhow, let's ignore the world that's burning around us right now and discuss video games, and the handful that I was actually able to finish in 2020, cause while the year was awful, I did get to play a few really good titles in that period of time, a few of which even rank amongst my personal favorites now. So, let's talk about them. And just letting that one person in the audience know that I'm kind of a broke dude who mostly plays catch-up for the most part, so don't expect every game to be from 2020, but do expect several titles that are worth your time. Also, before the video starts, because I don't talk about contentious topics, nor do I use clickbait thumbnails, my videos don't go that far in the algorithm, so as you're watching, consider liking the video and commenting your thoughts below. And if you like what you see here, consider subscribing. With all that said, let's get started. A game's style can do wonders when it comes to getting me interested. Smile for me is an adventure game that does quite a lot when it comes to standing out from the crowd. With a trippy visual style where 2D characters inhabit a 3D world with a surreal atmosphere. You play as a flower delivery boy exploring a rehab center made for people who are feeling down about themselves, and your goal is to help everyone with their own personal problems and to get to the bottom of what's actually going on in this strange place run by one of the most threatening nice people I've ever seen. It's a pretty short game, but it's also fairly memorable, and that's what's worth it in my book. Yes, I'm guilty of jumping on the bandwagon that took 2 whole years to get going, but hey, there's nothing too sus about that, right? To the 2 or so people who haven't played this game, or even heard about it, you either play as one of several color-coded astronauts maintaining a ship, or as an alien imposter trying to kill everyone on board. Playing with randos is alright, but the fun comes from playing with friends and lying directly to their faces till everyone is dead, or successfully blasting an imposter out of the airlock when on the other team. The psychological aspect of the game is probably what gave it its current appeal, as you can really mess with people to punish the wrong person. Is that pure evil? Yeah. Is it fun? Most definitely it is. This is one of the few new games that I played last year, along with it being a sequel to one of my favorite indie games, coming from a really talented studio, so I set my standards pretty high with this one, only to be left underwhelmed. Some of the elements that I liked about The Blind Forest were that it had a well-told story and a couple of unique ideas to call its own, some of which are lost in the sequel. The story was just, okay. I feel like some of the elements, like Ku's part of the story, felt shoehorned into the game, along with the main antagonist not hitting the same highs as the antagonist of the last game. Though I do like the ideas used for the antagonist, along with gaining mad respect for Moon Studios for how they handled the ending to the game. Combat is a massive step up, but it also feels a little bit more derivative of other Metroidvanias, along with it being kind of annoying that a few of the abilities have to be swapped out so often, killing the flow of the game. I kind of feel bad for criticizing the game because, holy hot damn, this game looks gorgeous. And the variety of locations is great, but at the same time, the frame rate drops like my upload schedule at pure random, so the mostly visually appealing parts, like the chase sequences, are hampered somewhat. I did enjoy what I played, but I'm not madly in love like I was expecting to be. Hopefully a second playthrough with all the necessary patches to improve performance might change my mind, cause there is a lot to like here. Probably one of the most polished pixel art games I've ever played in recent memory that had the potential to be one of the greats in the retro pixel art crowd, only to fall short in a couple areas. The story of Owlboy involves the titular Owlboy, Otis, and his band of misfits going on a fun adventure, only for everything to go completely off the rails. Taking cues from games like A Link to the Past and Yoshi's Island, you'll be traveling across the world and completing various dungeons to find a way to save the world. To accomplish this, you'll be relying on your allies to help out with enemies and obstacles you wouldn't be able to normally get past on your own. Visually, this game looks beautiful, with backgrounds that are desktop wallpaper worthy. It looked that good. It took the developers a full decade to make this game, and it all paid off. Though what makes the whole experience fall short for me is that it starts to feel a little undercooked once you get to the latter parts of the game, After you get your third party member, it feels like there should be a penultimate level, building up to the final parts of the game, along with fleshing out the world. Instead, we got a rushed final stage with the massive lore dump shoved in, and a final boss that doesn't feel as impactful. Still, I enjoyed my time playing, and I can see someone else appreciating the love and care put into the visuals of this game, so I'll leave this up as a good game that just falls short of true greatness. When it comes to survival games, I wouldn't consider myself to be a huge fan. I've tried dabbling in games like Minecraft in its early days, and attempted to play through Don't Starve, but none of them could hold my attention for too long. Terraria had me addicted for a while, but I never got to the second half of the game, which is where the best chunks of content is supposed to be. Subnautica is one of those few titles in the genre that not only kept my attention, but also was compelling enough that I could see it all the way through to the end. Playing as the survivor of a shipwreck on an ocean planet, your goal is to survive and thrive, while finding out what happened on this planet before you crash landed on it. Having the game be one giant underwater biome had the potential for things to get samey real fast, but the variety of settings plus the strange fun on the planet made things more interesting when you're traveling around the world. All that exploration isn't for nothing, since the more you explore, the more equipment that you can build to make traveling more easier. And you can even build a base to start thriving off the land rather than just surviving it. And when it comes to actually exploring the world, while the game calls itself a survival game, it actually slips into horror the farther you go from the shallows and the deeper that you go into the depths of the ocean. Which is only magnified by the fact that there is no defensive items bar a stun rifle and a knife. And while far from revolutionary, the story that actually ties Subnautica together is pretty interesting, with the mystery of the alien bases that you find in the game being a good hook to make this game's depths worth exploring. For most people, an expansion pack isn't worth taking time to talk about, but this just so happens to be one of the best expansion packs that I've played in recent memory, so I'm gonna talk about it. War of the Chosen is akin to one of those expansion pack sequels that some companies make to their successful games, but unlike everyone else, Firaxis decided to just make it DLC with a shit ton of content to justify the price. War of the Chosen is structurally the same experience as XCOM 2, but reworking elements that didn't work, like the bases that round the world and adding more enemies to the roster. The major addition comes in the form of 3 new types of super soldiers that can be added to your team, along with their own factions to help out with the overarching mission to take back Earth. To balance things out, you actually have to deal with 3 types of new mini-bosses, known as the Chosen, that will hunt you down throughout the game and can't be killed easily, with the fight against these guys being one hell of a rush. I do have my issues. All the new additions make this game noticeably easier, especially with the giant Majora's Mask type counter hovering over the player throughout the whole game being reduced to a non-issue thanks to the new factions, which kinda misses the point as to why it was there in the first place. And one thing Firaxis didn't fix from Enemy Within, the Blast expansion, was the snowballing of overpowered abilities and weapons, so the trip through the final level will actually become a cakewalk. But at this point I'm just nitpicking on what was a damn good bit of DLC for a damn good game. One of the worst parts of 2020, and what made it such a dismal year, was the fact that very early on, things looked bad, and it didn't look like anything was gonna get better. Because of this, I decided early on I'd pick up a random, quirky little indie game to feel better about the next few months I'll have to live with. It turned out to be the perfect game that I needed to play at this troubled time in my life. Wandersong is about a bard radiating some endearing vibes, traveling the land to learn a magic song that will save the world, while helping everyone else along the way through singing. The gameplay is fairly simple, as you just need to hit the right color-coded notes, with a generous time window to succeed, and the platforming to get from place to place is pretty basic. What elevates this game is the variety on display, with each chapter introducing something new to make what is a mechanically simple game feel more interesting. And going back to the story, there is the trap that most media can fall into by making the positive character feel optimistic to a fault. Wandersong avoids this pitfall gracefully by flipping events on their head, going as far as to even change the dynamic of the relationship between the hero and the quest that they're going on, even including a chapter where you deal with the crushing reality about the things that are outside of your control, something I did not expect in a game that looks like this. Don't take my praise as this game being some deep philosophical masterpiece, because I see it as a masterful execution of pulling the rug from underneath my feet and giving me some good vibes that actually felt earned with a cast that I actually grew to love. I gotta say, Marvel's Spider-Man definitely makes you feel like a Stan Lee character. As I booted up this game, I was expecting a Marvel-themed version of the Arkham games, and I partially got that, plus a little more. What made the Arkham games good was that they were great games on their own, but they were elevated by having the same energy as Batman the Animated Series. While Marvel's, Disney, Sony's Spider-Man had many homages to the last decade or so of Spider-Man media, it carves out an identity of its own to make it stand out from the many film and animated adaptations of the Wallcrawler by making Peter Parker an adult with all the baggage that comes with it. This is just as much a Peter Parker game as it is a Spider-Man game. The combat, it was the thing that most people are going to compare to Batman, as it goes for a similar type of counter-combat and stealth approach, though Spider-Man is a lot more wild and loose to fit the acrobatic nature of the character, and it's pretty fun. Stealth is a different story, as many of the enemies don't employ any clever tactics like in the Arkham games, along with sections feeling a little shoehorned in since you go into combat anyway after a few takedowns. Swinging around the city is pretty fun, since it does feel like some skill is necessary to get around the city more efficiently, especially in the small areas without buildings. It also helps that Insomniac fixed the mild immersion break of there being a glass ceiling above the world. That's something I appreciate. Very few games have compelling side content, but the side quests were pretty fun to do, and they actually made all the collectibles items related to Spider-Man's many adventures, making them actually feel like they have value beyond just making the completion number go up. So yeah, I enjoyed my time with Marvel's Spider-Man, and I'm looking forward to whatever's coming next. Aside from that PS5 redesign, I will never get used to that. The Game Awards continues to be an anomaly that I never will fully grasp. It seems like no matter how bad the non-trailer parts tend to get, people tune in every year to watch their favorite title get snubbed out by the cinematic game of that year. Basically what I'm trying to say is that Doom Eternal was done dirty.
Best family game, The Last of Us Part 2. Best esports game, The Last of Us Part 2.
Best sports racing game, The Last of Us Part 2. Best independent game, The Last of Us Part 2. Best simulation or strategy game, The Last of Us Part 2.
The Game of the Year award goes to The Last of Us Part 2.
Last year I played the 2016 revival of the Doom series, and the worst thing about that game was that I waited so long to actually play it. Everything was done really well, so how do you improve upon it? Well, you don't. You just construct something different with the same pieces and see if you can make something more interesting. And boy did they do that. The general flow of combat is the major change here, since you can't stick to two overpowered guns anymore now that enemies have weaknesses to specific weapons, meaning that guns that you get early in the game don't become useless near the end like the last time. Grenades are usable now, and along with the shoulder-mounted flamethrower, which rounds out your offensive capability early on. And then there's the elephant in the room, which I'm going to ignore for a moment because damn, this game looks gorgeous. The visuals are a substantial jump from its predecessor, along with just having more variety, so there's more to look at than just the Mars base and hell. Also, everything in the world just looks more stylized, from weapons to enemies, a change that I welcome. First-person platforming is a thing, and while that sounds like a nightmare run and a half, I kinda liked it. The first-person swimming, not so much. I think that's a good segue into the few flaws I had with Eternal, because while the game has a ton of variety, not everything hits the mark. The low ammo count, which has been a game breaker for some, wasn't too bad once I got to about the fourth gun or so, but until that point, enemy encounters don't flow as well as they do in the second half. Wait, what was that? Marauders? Guys, they're not bad, just get good. Me and the average rogue and Spire game have had a rocky relationship as of late. I liked the genre a lot back when it felt like an untapped market, but whenever I look at the Steam homepage, it's not too hard to find games inspired by The Binding of Isaac, Rogue Legacy, or Spelunky. So Risk of Rain 2 did quite a lot in this regard to get me invested enough to play it around the 100-hour length. Unlike its many contemporaries, this is a 3D action game as opposed to a 2D sprite-based one, and that extra dimension adds quite a lot. One of which is the cast of characters. What would normally be a bunch of alternate skins for the main character with different stats is replaced with 10 distinct characters with their own unique playstyle. The game flow starts off fairly simple, with you starting off in a grassy area, collecting items, and finding a teleporter to the next level, but after a few stages, stronger enemies become more plentiful, and the hordes that you face become so numerous it even affects the game's frame rate. Then there's the items, which can be stacked indefinitely, causing some pretty wild stuff to happen with the more unique items. Audio design is pretty top-notch, with a soundtrack that hits a nice middle ground between being calm and energetic, and the enemies actually have some good sound cues, so you're rarely caught off guard. The game isn't without issues. Honestly, it would be nice if I could stop a run and come back to it later, instead of choosing between pausing the game for a long time or giving up on a potential god run. I'm also not that fond of the lunar items, since the cons attached to some of them rarely make them worth picking up, but I'm just nitpicking at this point. I rarely find a game that I struggle to criticize, so Risk of Rain 2 deserves props for doing so much right. I've been getting more into challenging and atmospheric games in the last few years, which inevitably led me down the path of the Souls games. After playing a few titles that wore their influences shamelessly, I then went on to experience Demon Souls, a janky but still enjoyable title. My most recent romp through the From Software experience was Bloodborne, an experience that was something special. Trading the dark fantasy setting for a gothic horror style seems like a surface level change, but with the new location comes a lot under the hood. The trick weapons are a fantastic addition to spice up the combat with weapons that can change mid-attack, which in addition to the faster movements and no shield makes combat a treat. The new setting looks fantastic, but beyond the looks, the level design is something to behold, with levels wrapping around themselves, giving the player multiple shortcuts and connecting to other areas in pretty ingenious ways. What's also ingenious is the amount of optional areas in the game, all containing a substantial amount of content and some great boss fights. As you're exploring the world and learning all that happened before you arrived, you might notice that some enemies and architecture look a little off, and then it's revealed later on that behind all the witches and werewolves was an eldritch nightmare controlling everything from the start. With that discovery of the new horrors that wait beyond, this actually drove me to keep playing until the very end. And that's Bloodborne, an absorbing nightmare that I never wanted to wake from. Bar the one or two cheap deaths. When it came to the best game that I picked up last year, it was a toss-up between this and the last entry. The tiebreaker for me was that while Bloodborne was an excellent game, Yakuza 0 not only stole my attention for a long amount of time, but it also introduced me to a new series that I want to get more into. Looking at this game from the description, you'd assume it was a GTA type of game in a Japanese setting. Yakuza is more of a 3D brawler with the narrative of a gritty crime drama, located somewhere in this wacky Japanese setting starring some of the most likable cast of characters I've ever seen in recent memory. Gameplay consists of running around the tightly knit streets of Kamurocho and Sotenbori, completing small quests that, in one way or another, will end with you getting into a fistfight with someone. And damn is the fighting in this game great. Punches have a good amount of impact to them, and character movement feels slick as hell, with extra kudos given for making both Kiryu and Majima feel distinct from each other in both game feel and their fighting styles. The main story involves our two goodest boys getting involved in a small-scale drama, which is tied to gambits of massive proportions that in some way overlap with each other, and it's all excellent once the ball gets rolling. Though the reason why I powered through the admittedly slow opening was for some of the sub-stories. Darted across the overworld is a series of short vignettes into the lives of the weird citizens of the people that live in these cities, with the brevity of each quest being the main hook to do them all. The quirkiness of the sub-stories tends to magnify the serious moments of the main story by several margin, and when things get rolling, I was driven to see these guys' story through to the end. And that's what I feel is the core of the Yakuza experience. You start off punching dudes only to have fun doing side quests with the people of this world and playing all these fun mini-games so you get to know more of the main character, only to get invested in their personal struggles and wanting the best for them at the very end. And that's Yakuza 0. One hell of a great game. If you had to play any of these games, please play this one. It's a damn good time. This has been the Renegade Master, signing out. Hey, post-video Ren here. Just wanted to let you know that if you like the video, consider following me on Twitter and joining the Discord for updates and to talk about various things. The next video will be about Risk of Rain 2, where I talk about the various characters in the game, so I hope you look forward to it. Anyhow, catch you later.